Welcome back. The Free Market Foundation says it's lodged a Promotion of Access to Information Act request to the Correctional Services Department. It wants to know how many people are in prison who have not been sentenced and what crimes they've been sentenced for, crimes they're accused of committing. The Free Market Foundation says they believe our society is, as they put it, over-criminalized. For example, they suggest that there are laws on the books that suggest you could be sent to jail for deliberately disturbing another passenger on public transport or showing a film without permission and classification from the Film and Publications Board. Martin van Staden is the head of policy at the Free Market Foundation. Martin, good afternoon to you. What information do you want from the Department of Correctional Services?
Well, ultimately, Stephen, we want to know who is taking up the preciously limited space in South Africa's prisons. So our Section 12 initiative is all about criminal justice reform. We're looking at the police, we're looking at prosecution, we're looking at the decentralization of law enforcement authority. But one of these aspects is decriminalization. So I don't need to tell you that South Africa finds itself in a disastrous violent crime crisis. Yet, this is not an election item really this year in the most consequential election of a generation, and our project is about putting it on the agenda. And one of those aspects is seeing how very limited correctional capacity and resources are being wasted on what one might call harmless and victimless offenses, and you've already mentioned too. Now, we don't really have numbers to say that out of our 108,000 available beds in our prisons, 20% is taken up by people who inconvenience fellow passengers on public transport. We don't have those numbers. We need to get to those numbers so that we as South Africans in an election year can determine, is our criminal justice system prioritizing correctly? We know that our prisons are already over capacity. There is 40-odd thousand prisoners and inmates in South Africa, 1/3 of which, according to estimates, are unsentenced individuals, so they have been found guilty of nothing yet. And as I said, only 108 beds, and we're already standing at about 32% overcrowded. So clearly the space is limited. And if we're going to deal with violent crime, there needs to be space to house violent criminals. And if non-violent, non-serious offenders are taking up that space, we need to know. And once we find out, we need to take the next step in figuring out whether some of these acts need to be decriminalized so that we can better use those limited resources.
I'm sure in every country in the world you'll have a big difference between what the law says and what actually happens. Do you really believe, do you have any cases at all of people who might be in jail now for showing a film without permission from the Film Publications Board or deliberately disturbing a fellow passenger on public transport?
No, we don't. And that's why really we couldn't continue really with this project of ours without taking this step to really understand, are these laws in fact being enforced? And if they aren't being enforced, that opens up a different question about why do we have really tens of thousands, is our current estimate, of criminal acts on the books, in the statute books, if they aren't being enforced. Now, there's quotes that many viewers might be familiar with saying that if you just walk down the street, you're committing multiple crimes and you might not know about it. That itself is something that offends the rule of law, whereby one must know the law must make sense, and the law must be certain. Now, if you are in fact committing crimes if you operate a taxi service and you pick someone up near an international border and you bring them back to Johannesburg, you have in fact committed a crime for which you can go to jail for up to 3 months, but maybe that's not being enforced. That's a problem because that introduces huge uncertainty into an already kind of beleaguered economy and an already society that's already suffering from the consequences of out-of-control crime. So you're completely correct. There is a difference between what the law says and what happens in reality. But we must, certainly as civil society, make every effort to lessen that gap. And this a request to DCS is a big step in that direction. Okay,
Martin, so to sort of sum up your position, would it be fair to say, as the Free Market Foundation, you believe we have too many laws?
Well, yes, I think that might be a fair assessment. We certainly are an over-legislated society just as much as we are an over-criminalized society. You're familiar with the rest of our work, and I'm sure your viewers are as well. We do believe in widespread deregulation of our economy, certainly. But for the purposes of this project, certainly we are over-criminalized in various ways. There's too many crimes out there that don't really address a real mischief. And in another way, we're technically over-criminalized in that things that are already criminal are just recriminalized in new pieces of legislation. And in another way, there's various pieces of legislation that simply delegate to regulators and ministers the power to create crimes in regulations and in directives and in notices. So in that sense, we are over-criminalized in various ways. And then really, if we claim to have any respect for the rule of law, we have to clean up. And really, when it comes to addressing violent crime in South Africa, we need to clear the table, as it were, for the police, for prosecutors, and for our correctional services to make sure that they are, in fact, addressing the real scourge of violent crime in this country, rape, murder, all these things where we have dozens of cases every single day, every single hour that are not being addressed.
Okay, so Martin, I mean, I concede the point, and I think this point has been made many times, that government and people in charge often will try and fix a problem by bringing in a new law. So we have a problem with underage drinking. We're going to raise the drinking age from 18 to 21, but we can't enforce the drinking age of 18, so nothing changes. And I'll concede that that doesn't work in many cases. I would also concede, and I think it's a point that you may not have put in this way, but it's what you may believe, if I've heard you correctly, that a law that is not enforced weakens all other laws. Okay, I concede that point too. I would suggest, though, that if you had to put this to a vote, should we reduce the number of laws or should we actually increase the number of laws around criminal activity, you might be surprised. It might go against you, and that most people in South Africa might actually prefer to have new, tougher laws on crime rather than removing any of the laws we do have.
Yes, that might be so, but that's why one would not make that case quite as simplistically. I think most South Africans would agree that there is very specific criminality in this country that has to be addressed, and that's the things that everyone agrees to when they say, "Oh my goodness, crime is out of control." They never mean that people are driving from close to a border, transporting people. They never mean people are smoking in their own houses even when they are alone. They never mean filming someone on your phone and sharing that on WhatsApp. That's never what South Africans mean when they say crime is out of control. What they mean in 99% of cases are what in law is known as the mala in se, those things that are on their very face criminal. Murder, rape, the trio crimes, hijackings, house and business burglaries, trespassing. These are the things that South Africans have in mind. And certainly there's an argument to be made that we need tougher laws, even potentially more laws to address that kind of crime. So when one makes this case to the public, and certainly when we make this case to the public, we're not saying there should simply just be fewer laws, but rather that the crimes that we address must be very targeted. There's principled reasons for this, there's moral reasons for this that we as liberals hold very dear, but there's also a very practical reason for this, and that is that we have completely normalized violent crime in this country, and we treat these astronomical numbers really as just another day in sunny South Africa. And really that's sickening in a way. South Africa is a pariah state when it comes to violent crime. And if nothing else, even if you disagree entirely with the principled reasons behind the decriminalization of one society, one must accept that our police, our prosecutors, and our prison resources must be focused.
Martin, I was interested in some of the examples you used in your press statement. So you used the example of the Film Publications Board. You've mentioned the example of transporting someone close to a border, the example of disturbing someone, a fellow passenger on public transport. There are many others. I was slightly curious about your choice around vaping. You suggested that the new tobacco bill could make it illegal to smoke a vape in your own home if you use it as an office, and this would be around a proposal to say that you're not allowed to smoke in a workplace, even if it is a vape. There's an awful lot going on around the new tobacco bill, so let me just put the question to you bluntly so that you can answer it. Are you working with Big Tobacco to stop the new tobacco bill?
No, we are not working with Big Tobacco. We certainly speak to Big Tobacco about these things. We're not receiving any funds on that, but this is an issue that's very close to our hearts. We have, as the Free Market Foundation, supported various consumer rights issues. I am myself a non-smoker. I'm a teetotaler. I despise smoking, but it's a slippery slope, ultimately. If you allow government to be this close to you in your home, to tell you that you cannot smoke or vape inside your own work-from-home office, there's certainly a problem there. There's a fundamental sickness in society if you welcome politicians that closely to your residence. And we as the Free Market Foundation want to roll back the sheer outsized role that politics plays in our very daily lives. We think that ordinary society, families, communities, and so on must, if there is an issue like smoking, certainly a health issue in this country, that must be addressed at the social level, at the community, level.
But wouldn't it be that if you're using that workplace for meetings, if you have employees, and it's often the boss that gets to work from home, not always the employees, sometimes the employees, if you're using that space for meetings regularly, you would accept then that a place that's used for meetings, for workplaces, would then say that actually you can't smoke in front of other people?
I would certainly not accept that, no. If the boss smokes and you want to work in that company, that is an agreement you're going to enter into with that employer. There's various risks that people take every single day of their lives. Living in a society is an inherently risky business, and we all accept that to a very large degree. And it's a question of trade-offs. If you want that job, you're going to have to make some sacrifices from your own preferences, even your health. So no, I would not accept that. No.
So Martin, I just don't want to misunderstand you. You're suggesting that in the country with the highest inequality in the world, massive unemployment, an employer would be able to basically force their employee to live with their smoke at, as you've already conceded, a risk to their health. You say that they're trade-offs. I put it to you that most people in this country have absolutely no choice. They're desperate for a job, and they must just suffer the health consequences. Is that right?
The reality is that it's labor laws that are keeping South Africans largely unemployed, and with the liberalization of our labor markets, the choices available to South Africans for work would not only be limited to those bad bosses and those bad employers who make unreasonable requests of their employees, though they may do that. There would be various millions of available opportunities for people to choose from, and the only reason that is not available to our 14-odd million unemployed South Africans is because they have been priced out of the labor market. It is simply too risky and too expensive in this country to offer jobs to largely unskilled labor force. So that is the reason why we find ourselves in an unenviable position like that. But yes, you will find employers who make unreasonable requests, and yes, it is their house, it is their money ultimately, and that is their choice to make.
Okay, so someone who's got no other option, they've got a family to feed, often 9, 10, 12 people to feed, they must just suck it up, and if they lose, they develop lung cancer, well, that's just the price you pay. That's right?
Hundreds of thousands of South Africans work in our blazing sun. That is a risk that they take, yes, and that could lead to skin cancer. We cannot regulate and force employers to provide roofing on our farms. That is completely out of the question. But if we accept the slippery slope that laws like the tobacco bill represent, then we might end up in that place where the government steps into the role of a parent and says that we are going to eliminate all conceivable risks from your life, and only if those risks are eliminated may you work. And the proof will be in the pudding, in that virtually no South Africans will be employed if we accept that. And we as the Free Market Foundation want to roll back that nanny state, paternalistic, I know better than you employee approach that has been so dominant in South Africa for the last few decades.
Martin van Staden, the head of policy at the Free Market Foundation.